Hello, and welcome to our first lecture on interpersonal communication. We have three chapters on interpersonal communication, and actually have another day that you won't be reading about interpersonal, but I'll be talking about. So it's a pretty big unit, it's a pretty big area of study, and actually in the Communication Studies program, we have courses just on interpersonal. So if you are interested in studying interpersonal, we have them on interpersonal, a sort of a beginner and more advanced. We have a class on family. We're getting to some things now about the sort of darker side of interpersonal. So interpersonal is a big area, and it's something we do a lot of in my program, in my department. But here we are at interpersonal, and this chapter really focuses on some basic ideas about interpersonal, and a lot of focus on conversation. So let's look at that. The first thing I want to get into is a chart that's not from your book. Your book has a chart that talks about relationships being impersonal and interpersonal, right? On a continuum from most impersonal to most interpersonal. I'm going to grab the laser pointer here. There we go, right? So over here is most impersonal, and over here is interpersonal. So in the middle here, this chart is me building on what the book has said, and this is actually taken from a book called IPC, which is for interpersonal communication. That is interpersonal communication. I think I said that too quickly. All right. So when we look at the factors that help us understand whether a relationship is or the communication is impersonal or interpersonal, we're going to look at things like relationship history right here in the middle. Right? In an impersonal relationship, it's very limited. So if you look at your book and examples it gives, I think it has restaurant server, I think is one of those it has is limited, right? Or I mean impersonal. You have typically, generally speaking, a very limited relationship with your restaurant server. Now, it may be a restaurant you frequent. Well, again, not anymore because nobody's going to restaurants anymore. Please do me a favor and stay home. But anyway, but if there had been a place where you went often, or if you're a server and you saw people often, you had there's a relational history. Perhaps you had more, as opposed to seeing them once. You saw them a couple times a week. You got to know them more. So you had a less impersonal relationship. But how interpersonal is, I mean, I don't know. We'll get into that in a moment here. But I don't know if it's necessarily you have an expansive history, right? So I go to Lowe's. I'm at Lowe's, the home building supply store. Not infrequently, or before the pandemic, I was there more frequently, always getting stuff for the yard, for projects around the house, painting, all that sort of stuff. And there's a couple, 2, 3, 4 people there. When they see me, they'd say hello to me because they saw me so often. I saw them. Sometimes they would ask me how my children were doing because they would see me in the store with Eleanor and or Grant. A couple of them I knew that they had kids because they had told me, and I'd ask, oh, how are your kids doing? So that's sort of, we have more of a history, but it's still a pretty limited interaction because I'm not saying, oh my gosh, I got to tell you what happened last week, right? We just don't have that expansive a thing where we've done that. So our relational history maybe wasn't all the way over here, but it's still sort of over here, right? Still pretty impersonal. And that may be what you have a lot of times with faculty, professors, some bosses, right? Another dimension to look at whether a relationship is impersonal or interpersonal are the relational rules, right? Whether they're established by society, over here under impersonal, established by society, or they're established by partners, right? Those relational rules. So again, when I interact with people at Lowe's, I'm there as a customer, right? I rely a lot on the rules by society about how do you engage with people you don't know well? How am I as a customer supposed to engage with the people who work in a store? By the way, being respectful is pretty important there, right? But how am I supposed to engage with them? But I'm not supposed to, I mean, it would be more odd if when I saw them, I said, hey dog, what up? I mean, I guess if they knew me, they'd see me for a while, they wouldn't be as bad as opposed to a friend I have who, when I run into him on occasion, because our sons go to the same daycare, I'll see him, I say, hey dog, what up? Which is just sort of a joke, right? But and he calls me playa, right? This is the point is there's certain rules there about using these odd names with each other. It's not usually how you address a person that way. Right, if you think about impersonal versus interpersonal, the sorts of jokes and humor you have, right, there are rules. So I rely upon the rules set by society when I am at the checkout at the grocery store, right? I rely upon the rules of society about what I say to them and what I'm expecting them to say to me. As you have a very, interpersonal relationship, it's more over here, right? The norms of your, or I mean, some norms, we'll talk about that in a moment, but the rules of relationship are established by partners, right? How often do you have to call me as your friend? That's established by the partners, or, that's something we can establish, right? How often we have to see each other. Partners establish that, whereas professor and student, if it's a live class, there are rules about how often I should see you, and it's, every class period. Okay. And the last feature is one called relational uniqueness, right? So how unique, so what is it that makes this relationship different from others? So even when I have light banter with the people who work there at Lowe's, it's still sort of impersonal because it's confined to a certain type of relationship with people you see often, but you don't even know each other's names, right? As opposed to my friend who, I call him, dog on occasion, which is a complete joke. I sound like an idiot when I say it, right? Those are rules governed by, we individually, right, have decided the uniqueness of that relationship. There might be people that you work with that you rely upon, how unique is your relationship? You go, well, really, it's completely governed by, uh, what's understood as appropriate for the group, as opposed to other relationships you have with people at work, very much governed by what you individually feel is appropriate in that relationship. So anyway, it's just the idea to think about the features that make a relationship impersonal or interpersonal. Has to do with the history you have, the rules you've established, and what's the uniqueness of this particular relationship. So moving then into conversation, with your book spends a good bit of time on. There's lots of good stuff I think the book's pretty clear about, so I'm not going to say much about many of those things. One of the things I do want to talk about is the difference between dialogue and monologue, which the book gets into some, and I'd like to just, delve into it just a touch more here. So the goal of dialogue is mutual understanding, right? And if you think about when you're talking with, whether it's a coworker, a friend, a family member, when it's a true dialogue, I say mutual understanding. It's not like we're having a deep debate about, politics, philosophy, religion, although, we might. But sometimes this mutual understanding is just sharing an experience. Right, you're talking about this. I go, oh, I get it. I've been there before. I had something like that happen to me, etc. Right. So the goal there is mutual understanding. But in monologue, it's all about, I want you to hear my story. I want you to feel a certain way. Right. But it's not about sharing this thing with you, maybe you share with me, we both sort of get each other. It's just about, I have an agenda. I want you to think something of me, respect me, understand what I'm saying, do the thing I want, whatever it is. But monologues are about a personal agenda, not about us sharing anything and having something that's mutual. Dialogue, of course, has emphasis on partners, and those partners are to have mutual respect for each other, right? Mutual respect, to be sincere, to say things they mean, right? To be sincere, right? As opposed to in a monologue where the speakers are just the audience. You don't have partners. In a monologue, there's a speaker and there's an audience. And that's what it is. Me talk, you listen, right? That's what we have going on here. As opposed to a dialogue where they're partners with mutual respect and are treating each other sincerely. Get rid of my little pointer. See a pointer? Okay, right. And so the speaker is disinterested, right? As opposed to trying to develop respect and be with their partner, they're just interested in the audience. And in dialogue, individuals can freely decide what they want to share. They get to decide how long they're going to participate, right? This is a free choice. And monologue, it's not about, I suppose you can get up and walk out of an audience, but monologues are those situations in which people are wanting praise, right? They're not wanting you to freely decide how you're going to feel. They're in it for you to praise them. Right, that's what monologue is about. It's not about people having free decision to express themselves, to come and to go as they need to or feel appropriate. But instead, the purpose of you being there is to be there to give praise to the person speaking. So conversation is hugely important in relationships, and the book goes on a lot about how men and women are different. As somebody who teaches gender communication, I can tell you those differences are being blown out of proportion a little bit, but regardless, for both men and women, conversation is important. That's just sort of across lines. Conversations are important. In different relationships, there's different types of conversation, but conversations are important. But I want to talk with you about the work of John Gottman. So John Gottman has like hundreds of hours of studies. He has done these audio recordings he's done of couples, romantic couples, of how they talk to each other, and then following up with them to see whether or not they stayed together or they didn't. They're primarily married couples, but sometimes they were committed. So maybe they were cohabitating, right? And they made a commitment to each other, but maybe hadn't actually married for a variety of reasons. And so he says that what happens in a couple is that you two are there, right? Two of you are there, and one of you says something to the other. He says that's a bid. He calls that a bid. That one of you says something to the other, and that's a bid. And he says it's an offer for connecting. Right, so a bid is an offer to connect. That, which I like that because it reminds us that conversation, being rather important in relationships, has to do with us, right? Talking with somebody, telling them what happened in your day or what's bothering you or what you've been thinking about doing. All those are opportunities for connection. So anyway, it's beautiful. But so a bid is an offer for connection. You say something hoping to communicate, connect with them. And these are verbal. They can be nonverbal. The brush on a shoulder, or that's a bid, right? That's a bid. And so an example would be, let's say that my wife and I are sitting in a room, and the children are off somewhere, not making a lot of noise. We're talking fiction here, right? And my wife looks out the, I guess, looking out her window. I guess you could see somebody walking the dog down the street. Might look out the window and say, "Oh, look at that cute dog." So she has her book and I have my book, and she says, "Look at that cute dog." Well, that's a bid, right? She's asking to connect with me in that moment. And so we're going to talk about the three responses I might have and what those responses indicate about the future of our relationship, or at least the potential success of our relationship. Excuse me. All right. So one option is I can turn toward. And so turn toward is to have some sort of positive reaction to this bid. The bid was, look at that cute dog. So a response would be like, oh, yeah, it is, right? That's turning toward. It's to say, oh yeah, I see that, very cute dog. I don't have to say, oh my gosh, the cutest dog, you are so right. You're the best finder of dogs. I don't have to do that. It's just saying, oh, yeah, it is. It validates her. It acknowledges what she said. It validates it. And I can go to my book. Oh yeah, it is a cute dog. My wife loves dogs. I mean, I do too, but she really loves dogs, right? You can go back to your book, and that's okay. That's turning toward. It's positive which is a positive reaction. That's good. That sort of thing supports stable, long-lasting relationships. If I'm there cooking dinner, maybe my wife is cooking dinner, and one of the other of us goes up and puts her hand on the other one's shoulder, right? Just to look at the person, smile, like, oh, thank you. Like, that's turning toward, right? Those sorts of things support stable, long-lasting relationships. I can also turn away, and turn away is like, I can't right now, right? I mean, I won't say those words, right? So just ignoring or avoiding the bits. So she has her book, I have my book. She looks up from her book and says, oh, look at that cute dog, right? And I just don't say anything. Like, she's like, oh, yeah, cute dog. And I think, and I'm just like, there's dogs all around. I don't, but I don't say anything, right? That's silence. It's okay in moderation. If you do it a lot, it's going to lead to defensiveness, and there's and likelihood of early divorce or separation. Right? So the research says is you do it too often, early divorce and separation, or separation. But you can do it some, right? But that'd be turning away. Right? By contrast, the third really sort of hostile action is turning against, right? Being argumentative, critical, or sarcastic toward the bid, right? So argumentative, critical, or sarcastic. So it's being annoyed. Oh, look at that cute dog. Must you comment on every dog, right? If I were to say, yes, it's a dog, congratulations, many, many dogs in this world. What did the doggy say? I mean, that would be really harsh, critical, sarcastic, right? That would be turning against, as you might imagine, often leads to divorce or separation. I say divorce there, but divorce or separation is what it often leads to, right? So that's turning against. And so the point of this is that conversation, and Gottman does say so this can be nonverbal, but conversation and how we engage these conversations is what helps to maintain relationships. It can also be the sign that our relationships are in trouble, perhaps that we're moving toward ending them because of the way that we're interacting with each other. right? So it's through these interactions that we establish and maintain our relationships. So there are things that we do in conversation. This is some of the stuff the book touches on, right? We talk about compliment giving, right? As the book says, be real and honest, compliment in moderation, right? And avoid qualifiers, right? Like, oh, well, boy, you really look good for today, or today. Like, you really look good today is like, you don't usually, right? So avoiding qualifiers. I have a tendency, because I'm a very literal person, I have a tendency to want to use qualifiers. It's a terrible trait. And so if you'll say, I do a good job with this, don't I? My tendency is to say, well, you do a good job sometimes, or, well, you do a good job when you're trying. I mean, I'm terrible, right? So I have to hold all that back and just say, yes, right? But avoid qualifiers when you're giving compliments. It just doesn't help, right? And the book talks about these things, and also the book talks about accepting them, right? But there's also this notion of backhanded compliments, right? You're really blank for whatever, right? You're really good. My father once told my sister, you're a really good driver for a woman. That's not much of a compliment, right? So we call that a backhanded compliment, right? Sort of, because it's not giving the front of the hand, it's the back of the hand, right? So it's a backhanded compliment, right? Or, boy, you're not like other, you're not like other men, you're like other women, suggesting, or I mean, other people of your age, whatever it might be, right? It's really insulting as it says, I thought you were going to be a piece of crap, but it turns out you're not so bad. Okay, that's not a compliment, right? So beware of these backhanded compliments. And you look so much better now. That's a qualifier nobody needs. Okay, moving on. Right. The book talks about necessary elements of apologies, and I'm going to reiterate them here super fast because I think that being able to give a good apology is desperately lacking in our culture, that people are terrible at it, and that we really need to get back to what's important and necessary in an apology, right? And here's what they are, right? Admit your wrongdoing, be apologetic, be specific. Not, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings, but I'm sorry I said that thing that was terrible, right? Empathize, right? This sort of show real sort of recalcitrance, right? I don't want to do it again, right? Just, yeah, I'm sorry I did it. Are you going to do it again? I mean, tell me you're not going to do it again, right? Avoid giving excuses, right? I'm sorry I did it, but you have to understand I was having a bad day. It's one thing if you say, I was having a bad day, but that doesn't matter. You don't deserve that, and I'm sorry. That's okay, right? But saying, I'm really sorry I did that. I was just having a bad day. That means you're not really all that sorry because you think you're not responsible for your actions. See attribution theory, right? And to choose the appropriate channel, right? Should the apology be sent by text? Should you call them? Should you do it in person? Do you just do it in skywriting? Balloons? I don't know. What do you need to do? And here is a clip of Jonah Hill. Yeah, Jonah Hill. I'm getting confused with Seth Rogen, of course, right? But of Jonah Hill apologizing on The Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon, for having used a homophobic slur with a paparazzi. And I want you to look at his apology and see how he does these things that he's like, I did it because of this, but that doesn't excuse it. That was terrible of me. And I mean, he just really just sort of says, what I did doesn't make me a good person, or is if you think I'm not a good person for doing it, basically, I get it, right? Because what I did is not what a good person does, and he's very honest about it. So watch the clip and think about it. Please really pay close attention. It's like a master class in an apology.
Welcome back to our show. I appreciate you being here. We always like you as a guest.
I'm thrilled to be here, and I'd actually like to address something, if that's okay, to your audience. Is it unfortunate?
I heard about this. Now, something happened over the weekend. You got in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, this isn't a joke. So, this weekend I was out with some friends, and there was a paparazzi guy, and he was antagonizing me and calling me names, attacking me personally and my family personally, and I was genuinely hurt by this and made angry by this. And in response, I wanted to hurt him back. And I said the most hurtful word that I could think of at that moment. And, I didn't mean this in the sense of the word. I didn't mean it in a homophobic way. And I think that, that doesn't matter, you know, how you mean things doesn't matter. Words have weight and meaning. And the word I chose was grotesque, and, you know, no one deserves to say or hear words like that. And, you know, I've been a supporter of the LGBTQ community my entire life, and I completely let the members of that community and everybody else down when I used a word like that this weekend. And my heart's broken, and I genuinely am deeply sorry to anyone who's ever been affected by that term in their life. And I'm sorry, and I don't deserve or expect your forgiveness, but what I ask is that at home, if you're watching this, and you're a young person especially, if someone says something that hurts you or angers you, use me as an example of what not to do. And don't respond with hatred or anger, because you're just adding more ugliness to the world. And again, I'm so sorry.
I appreciate you actually being sincere in saying that.
Yeah, I know I'm usually funny and stuff, but this wasn't funny. It was stupid, and
yeah.
I deserve the I'm going to get for it, you know?
Yeah. Well, no, that's good that you came out and you came out and no, I didn't mean
This guy is the host of the Tonight Show for a reason.
I'm sorry, no, you came out here and told us all, and a lot of people watch the show, and a lot of people are fans of yours, so that's, it's good for you.
You have to be honest sometimes.
You have to. Well, thank you.
My love and apologies to everybody.
Yeah.